Hello my beautiful friends and welcome back to our channel and today's video on overwhelming all over people. So this video is for you if you are somebody who is susceptible to feeling overwhelmed. And when you get that feeling of overwhelm, you can see that it clearly impacts the way that you show up around other people and the way that you interact with other people. And this would be a typical response as a human to overwhelm. Overwhelm creates this great urgency in our body. It's got this valence that's very unpleasant in terms of an emotion, and it's very high arousal in terms of an emotion. So it does tend to impact our behaviors unless we've trained ourselves to interrupt that emotion turning into a behavior. And this is what I want to offer to you today. This is something that you can learn by training these skills we teach in coaching. So in coaching, we're very results focused. So often we're looking forwards to the kind of person that we want to be, the kind of outcomes that we want to create. And we're looking at how we can bridge the gap from where we are now to where we want to be. So as well as looking forwards in terms of creating new good things in our lives, we also need to look back and look at our current self and clean up what's currently getting in our way, what's stopping us from moving forwards. And for a lot of us, an emotion of overwhelm is a very common barrier. Most people feel helpless when it comes to overwhelm. And today I'm going to show you how you can use the coaching skills to interrupt this emotion from turning into behaviors that don't support you in achieving your goals or showing up as your best self. Specifically, when we're talking about overwhelming all over people, I want to focus today on how you show up, how it affects your presence, your communication, and your thinking when it comes to other people when you're feeling overwhelmed. And I want to do this by sharing a personal example that I've had this very morning with overwhelm and what my older, lower mind wanted me to do in terms of something that I have practiced habitually over years and years. And instead, how my higher, coached, more skillful mind handled the situation instead. Let's talk about it. Now, I'm actually in a 30-minute gap between coaching clients right now. And the reason why this is also an amazing topic to talk about right now today, and I wanted to film this right now, is because I also just coached one of my amazing, impressive clients on this very issue as well. So one of the important things that came up, and the first thing I want to bring to your attention with these emotions like overwhelm, is that we often think that our stress is useful. Any kind of stress, any kind of pressured emotion, any emotion that gives you energy, even if it's in that negative realm like stress, distress, pressure, overwhelm, anxiety, we have this idea that that energy that these emotions bring is good because it moves us into action. And it is true that when emotions have this high level of energy, they do tend to move us into action. That does tend to be their purpose, to make us do something. We talked about how one of her reactions to overwhelm is to tick something off her list, to do a task so that she can then feel more relaxed, less overwhelmed, feel some relief, feel some sense of gratification, or that she's achieving something, feel more confident in herself. And here's the thing, yes, these high arousal emotions do tend to move you into action, but we care very much about exactly what action they move us into, exactly what quality of action, what behavior that emotion drives. Because while just doing something might make you feel better in terms of that emotional response, it might help you escape that emotion. Solving for the emotion is not the way to solve the problem. This is treating the emotion like it's the primary problem, the thing that needs to be solved. And that's what really your body and mind is kind of designed to do. If you feel an emotion that triggers this sort of fear or stress response, the idea is that this emotion is so unpleasant that we try to feel better, that we do something to correct whatever this stress is apparently indicating as a problem. But the problem is this is a crude system. If you know how the cognitive programs work in coaching, the sequence is your thoughts create your emotions, which create your behaviors. And not only are your emotions not a direct reflection of reality of the situation that you're in, but even if you go one step further back, your thoughts are not a direct reflection of the environment that you're in. There is a situation, and then we have thoughts about the situation. And those thoughts produce the emotion. Now, when we have an emotion like overwhelm, one of those high arousal, unpleasant emotions, our primary focus for our mind and body in terms of how we have evolved to survive is to make that emotion go away. We are trying to solve at that emotion line. Instead of using our minds, our intelligence, our awareness, our metacognition, and recognizing that this emotion is only here because of a thought. And that thought is worthy of being questioned to see if it's actually representing the situation I'm in genuinely. So this is the first thing I want to bring your attention back to when it comes to you feeling and having this overwhelm experience. Yes, doing something, i.e. behaving, taking behaviors from the emotion of overwhelm might create some positive results in your life. I want you to look at the full result, all of the behaviors that come from this overwhelm, and decide if that's really an emotion that you want to act from. And knowing that your emotion is only there because of your thoughts about the situation, then you recognize that you are not stuck in this situation of overwhelm because of the situation. But in fact, if you look back at the thoughts driving the overwhelm and then further back at the situation, you will have more options about what emotion you create and therefore what behaviors you take from that emotion and what outcomes you produce. So now let's talk about one of the behaviors that comes from overwhelm, which is the topic of this video. It's when we overwhelm all over people. And this is a situation in which we are acting from our overwhelm and we are interacting with people because of that in a way that is embodying and exuding all of that overwhelm feeling that we are experiencing. So yes, in my client's case, from this overwhelm emotion, she might have gone and ticked something off her to-do list. But in the process, what other distraction did she cause? What other harm or discrepancies in her behaviors were there based on how she actually wants to act and what she wants to get done as her best self? So we can talk about the fact that when you're in that overwhelmed state, like yes, you did something, but was that really the task that your best self would have planned to do? If you're actually feeling calm and thinking clearly, was that the task that you'd actually spend your resources on? But when it comes to overwhelming all over other people, we can simply think about the way that we show up when we're overwhelmed. We talked about how we get in this frazzled state. When we're in this frazzled state and we feel like we can't think clearly, we're not considerate of ourselves or considerate of other people. We're not thinking clearly in a way that looks at the overall picture, the overall result we want. We're just trying to do something quickly to feel better. And we're fixated on whatever behavior, whatever change we think we can make that will relieve us of this intolerable feeling of overwhelm. So let's swap now to talk about my personal experience with overwhelm this morning so I can demonstrate this for you. And I'm going to show you how my urge, my initial temptation or reaction was to overwhelm all over my partner in this case. But instead I interrupted this and did something different. So accumulating over the last couple of days, we've actually had multiple security breaches by seemingly coincidence at a couple of our properties and now in our bank account as well. Now I've done enough mind management, thankfully, over the years to be able to actually handle those concerns as they came up to a point that it didn't impact my plans or the way that I showed up in a significantly detrimental way. So we had a breach of one property, then we had a breach of our bank account, and then that spurred the idea that we could have had a breach at another property. Now, this was okay in terms of separating out what was important, what wasn't important, what was replaceable, what wasn't. But then the idea that our precious, amazing, gorgeous, love of our life dog could have potentially not been safe was the thing that brought up this urgency and these feelings that felt more overwhelming to me. With the other situation, when it was just things, my mind had practiced enough recognizing what was in my control and what was out of my control, and also thinking forward to the worst case scenario and what was replaceable and what was not replaceable, and sort of making peace with that. I could see that it would only hurt me to worry about things that weren't in my control. And it would be better for me to be in that calm thinking space to be able to find the best solutions and see the most genuine problems. Now, when it came to our dog, however, I did not have thoughts in my mind. I had not practiced thoughts before that could provide me any calming reassurance that it would be okay if my dog was not okay. This is something that I would likely choose to be desperately distressed about if that was the case. And when this idea came into my mind, I looked at what I could and couldn't control. And once I had done everything I could do at that time, I was still left with this feeling of overwhelm. So we're lucky to truly have multiple levels of security in terms of we have these electronic locks that we can track, and more than anything, we have these gorgeous, amazing neighbors who are parents, and they also happen to work from home. So she was able to come over and check on our dog. In that space of the sort of 10 to 15 minutes, I noticed this overwhelm take over my body, it felt like. I did not feel in control when I was experiencing that overwhelm. Now here is the win that I want to talk about today. In this 15-minute period, when I was waiting to hear about the safety of my dog, when I had recognized that I had done everything that I could reasonably do at that point. I should mention the context so the story makes sense. I am in a different state right now because I'm working away. My fiance is living in this house with our gorgeous pup, and he was at work that day, so our dog was home alone. One of the security breaches with our card made me think of the possibility that it could have been from our house being accessed, and Humphrey was in the house. Now, in this 15-minute period, what I recognized my urge was to contact my fiance, who I knew was at work. The reason that I wanted to contact my fiance was not because I thought he was going to be a part of the solution, a part of making sure that Humphrey was safe. In fact, our neighbors were the more direct solution to checking that Humphrey was safe. But I still had this urgency to reach out to him. The only reason that I wanted to reach out to him was because I was hoping that he would be able to comfort me or help me escape this feeling of overwhelm. Here, this was my urge to react to this overwhelm. If I reached out to him and shared my fears, I would hope that he would validate my fears, and that would somehow ease or soothe some of the overwhelm I was feeling. I was thinking that he was somebody who would understand the position I was in and sympathize with me, and that would somehow relieve my overwhelm. And maybe with the helplessness, doubt, the powerlessness that comes with overwhelm, I was hoping that he might present more options, more potential problem solutions, more blind spots that I haven't seen for myself in terms of solving the problem faster. Now, because I've done this thought work, I was suspicious of the actions that felt urgent when I was feeling overwhelmed. So instead of immediately taking those behaviors, I looked into why I wanted to reach out to him and if any of my reasoning was actually valid. Here, I saw the emotion in my body and moved back up to the thought line to see why that emotion was there. I was able to recognize that in this situation, reaching out to him was nothing more than me trying to relieve this emotional distress that I was feeling. It wasn't actually going to move me closer to a solution. Now, here's the other part of it. If I reacted to that emotion and reached out to him, sure, I might have gotten some emotional relief, and you're like, well, why not do that? But in our situation, my fiance was at work. I don't want to share my distress with him and potentially prompt distress in him too when he's at work. In this case, his input wasn't required. So if I chose to react to my overwhelm, I would just be overwhelming all over him, passing on my overwhelm to him for some kind of comfort, soothing, validation for myself, without it actually producing a better solution to our problem. All I'm doing is giving him some of my overwhelm. I'm overwhelming all over him without benefit. So I wanted to share this one with you guys today because I want you to start to develop this suspiciousness for when you're feeling overwhelmed, to really look into the type of urgency that this creates and the behaviors that tend to come from that, because often they probably won't be your best work and they probably won't produce the best outcomes for you. Importantly, the way that you show up does affect other people, whether it is in an intimate relationship like this, or whether it's in professional relationships at your work, or whether it's just you being present in a room, in a space with other people, and your overwhelm is shared with them, and it affects the room in a way that it's not useful for the room, that you're not contributing good into the room. Now, I see this happen all the time in the hospital. There seems to be a lot of overwhelm happening, and there's lots of stories that we bring with us into the hospital about the importance of all the different jobs that we do, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, an allied health professional, in administration, whatever it is. We all have a lot of importance and urgency in our minds about whatever tasks that we're doing. But with this, we often disregard or don't consider how this urgency sort of ranks in terms of priorities with the other people we work with. Everybody's job is important and everybody has urgent and important things in their work. In the hospital as a medical registrar, I have a great circle of people who want my attention and want to interrupt me and give me messages and tell me important things, whether it is my consultant giving me messages, whether it's my intern or my co-registrars, whether it's other nurses. And we often take this simply opportunistic approach of, oh, I'm physically present with the person, I might as well ask them now. This is one of our most dreaded interactions in the hospital, when people say, oh, while you're here. And this is because we intuitively know the while you're here means that this message that we're about to receive, this way that we're being interrupted, isn't well triaged. It signals that this is just opportunistic while you're here. Not because this is important or urgent, or not because this is a well thought out timing for a request, but just because it's opportunistic. The other frustrating fact about this in the hospital is this often happens when you're in a moment-to-moment relationship with somebody and you do not have any defense or barrier to say, not now. Once you've been interrupted, you have been interrupted. You can't take that back. You can't recommence or retune back into the thought that you were having. And you lose this precious information that to you was important and urgent. When you were tracing that thought and got interrupted, now you have to go back and find what was important and urgent to you at that time. So it's very hard to control this space, to keep this space for yourself in the hospital when you're in person, especially because you don't get to work with the same people all the time. You're often changing teams. So it's challenging to create a culture around this. So I think as individuals, especially those of us who work in the healthcare system, and you've probably got similar systems in your work as well, we need to be respectful and considerate of other people and the fact that they have important and urgent things that they are pursuing. And we need to be considerate to not interrupt this purely from an opportunistic perspective. We need to manage our own sense of urgency first. We need to be able to interrupt these feelings like overwhelm before they cause us to just overwhelm all over other people, try and pass off our responsibilities or take things off our mind and hand them over to somebody else. This will make you a much more well-loved colleague and peer in whatever workplace you are in. If you think this is something that you could really benefit from, then come along coaching with me. I love to teach and train these topics because I know that we're making a world a better place, one person at a time. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in my next one.